Like many other early adopters of the iPhone 14 Pro Max, I have had this phone for exactly 1 week. I got it last Friday. Today is Thursday, September 22nd when I'm recording this video. So I've had a full week to use this phone and some real world experiences and some real problems I want to share with you guys because, to be honest, coming from an iPhone 13 Pro Max, this phone had some tremendous shoes to fill. Now, right out of the gate, guys, one thing I noticed right away within the first day or two of using this phone is that the battery life is definitely not as good as the iPhone 13 Pro Max, okay? I don't have any hard data or evidence to show you, like, some really good test videos like I've seen Max Tech and Luke Miani do videos on showing exactly how good the battery life is and what it compares to last year's model. I don't have that for you, but what I can tell you as an iPhone user who uses this thing heavily every single day for work, mainly shooting a lot of 4K content, this phone does not last nearly as long as the iPhone 13 Pro Max. I would say the battery life on this is at least 10 to 15% worse. To give you an example, yesterday I shot an hour's worth of 4K 60 frames per second video on this device, and when I started off the day I had 100% battery life. By the time I finished shooting those videos, I had a little bit under 60% battery, and just from using the phone, watching some YouTube videos, replying to some messages throughout the day after that, I ended the day with about 30% battery on this phone, which means I had to charge it overnight in order to be able to use it again today. And it's already down to 83% today, and I haven't shot any video on this phone today. I've only used it to reply to YouTube messages and basically just check YouTube analytics. That's all I've used it for, and it's down to 83%. Now, if this was the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I can guarantee I would still be in the 90% range, and I have had countless numbers of days where I used the iPhone 13 Pro Max similarly to how I described, shooting an hour's worth of 4K content and still having 50% battery by the end of the day after everything, after using it for messages, after using it to watch YouTube videos, things like that, listen to music. And I could literally go every other day without charging the iPhone 13 Pro Max. To give you an example, I would plug in the phone overnight, get to a full charge, I'll shoot a bunch of videos, use the phone, still have about 50% battery, don't charge it. The next day I would not shoot any videos and just use the phone throughout the day, and usually end the day with around 20 to 30% battery life. 2 full days of usage on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And I feel like there's no way you can get that amount of usage out of this 14 Pro Max. And to be quite honest, guys, we've gotten spoiled with battery life with these new iPhones. Coming from an old iPhone 10 and then jumping up to the 12 Pro Max was a pretty good leap. But then going from the 12 Pro Max to the 13 Pro Max was an even bigger leap, and the battery life has just been amazing on the 13 Pro Max. And unfortunately, this thing is a step backwards. I mean, if you're coming from an older device, a 12 Pro Max or older, you'll notice an improvement most likely. But if you're coming from a 13 Pro Max, I think anybody will notice the downgrade in battery life. And for somebody that uses the phone all day like me, that's a big negative, guys, because now I have to go from charging my phone every other day to charging it basically every day. So that's one big negative if you ask me. Now, another shocking problem that I have had with this phone, which I will put up a clip on the screen so you can see, is one of the other main reasons I bought this phone is Apple advertised in their keynote presentation that this device should be much brighter when you're outside and in the sun. And I use my phone outside all the time, especially when I'm shooting videos, and I fully expected this display to hold up and be even brighter while I'm outside shooting than the 13 Pro Max. Well, it turns out this thing gets even dimmer than the 13 Pro Max, and I'm disappointed. I don't know if I have a defective model or not, because I saw Max Tech's video on this and they're claiming that they've had a good experience with the brightness levels being high outside. But the thing I'm unsure about is if they are actually using it to film video, because I have noticed a ton of dimming and a ton of heat coming from this thing when I'm shooting 4K 60 video, and this thing will get roasting hot. Much hotter than the 13 Pro Max ever did, and the display will get dimmer for longer. So this is yet another step backwards, if you ask me, coming from the 13 Pro Max. Now the next thing, I'm not really sure if this is just an iCloud problem or if it's actually a problem with this device, and that is that ever since I restored the backup on this phone, and this has been my daily phone, some of the settings are just not working properly, even though they actually transferred over from iCloud. And to give you the perfect example, what I'm going to show you here is the display. I have it set right here, as you guys can see, display and brightness, to turn automatically to dark mode at 6:30 p.m., which is in about 15 minutes. And every single night that I have seen so far, I've had to go in here and manually change it. Even though the setting is there, it's not actually turning over to the dark mode automatically. So like I said, I'm not sure if this is an iOS issue or an actual issue with this device, but it is not changing over on its own, so it's yet another annoyance that I have to deal with this phone. Another issue that I have been having is with the always on display. You guys can see this is how it looks right here, and it's supposed to be always on, just like it says. Well, it turns out that it's not always on. I heard Max Tech say that if you have an Apple Watch and you walk away from the phone, it will turn off the always on display. I don't have an Apple Watch, I only have the phone, and a lot of times late at night, I'll be looking at this thing at like 2 in the morning, just seeing it sitting there on the couch, and all of a sudden the always on display is off, just out of the blue. And it will turn back on after I grab the phone. I don't know if that's supposed to happen, but if you ask me, always on means always on. And it's not facing down, it's sitting up like this, and all of a sudden it just is off. So once again, not sure if this is a device issue or an iOS issue, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem to be working exactly like it's supposed to be. And kind of related to that issue, when I am done charging this device, I'll put it on the charger, I get up in the morning, take it off the charger. This is how it looks. Let me show you. I'm gonna actually give you an example here. So when I bring it off the charger, first thing in the morning, the display brightness is always like this, at the very lowest setting. And I don't change this manually. I usually use my display brightness right around here or so, most of the time when I'm indoors, and I leave it like that when I charge it, but yet when I get up, it's all the way down, guys, just like that, like you can't even see what's going on. Once again, not sure if it's a software issue or an iPhone 14 Pro Max issue, but I'm pointing it out for you in case you're considering buying one of these things. One last issue that I noticed, and this is just after a week, guys, so if I notice more things, I'll definitely make another video for you and point them out. But another thing I noticed is when dark mode is on, for example, it's supposed to translate over into all, at least the Apple apps. So as soon as you turn dark mode on, everything should be in dark mode, like the stock market app, Safari, whatever. But speaking of Safari, that's where I'm having the issues. So when I have Safari on like this, if I go to Google something, now look at this, it still shows up in white. Before, it would show up dark. I can even grab my iPhone 10 right over here and do the same thing and show you guys that it's supposed to show up in dark mode, not in light mode like this. I just did the same search on my iPhone 10. Safari is in dark mode, okay? iPhone 14 Pro Max is not. So to me, this eliminates it being a software issue because the iPhone 10 is updated to the latest iOS 16 update, as well as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. But for some reason, this is not catching on and doing dark mode in Safari. Yet another glitch. What's going on? I have no idea. So I'm reporting it to you guys. In fact, I'm even considering returning the phone because the truth is, I'm not really that impressed with it, you know? The 13 Pro Max was by far the best iPhone I'd ever had, and the 12 Pro Max had a lot of problems, and I made a problem video on that device. But literally the 13 Pro Max came out and squashed every single problem that the 12 Pro Max had and just improved the device tremendously. And I was hoping that the iPhone 14 Pro Max would come along and do the same thing, even though the 13 Pro Max doesn't really have any real issues. I would just hope it would be an even better version of that phone, but it turns out it seems to be inferior. I'm not going to get into how the camera looks or anything like that in this video. I have another video I'll probably do on that. But I wanted to show you guys all of the problems I'm having with this phone before you buy it, because if you're coming from a 13 Pro Max at this point, I would highly recommend you hang on to that phone and just wait for the 15, because so far I'm not impressed with this purchase based on these issues. And maybe you want to upgrade if you're coming from a 12 Pro Max or an 11, anything before the 13 models. But if you're on the 13 generation, you might want to skip this one. And this is not a review, guys. This is just my real world experience and the real problems I'm experiencing with this phone.